Today from the global lane, Trump says they're no angels. Can America trust the Syrian Kurds? What you may not know about them. Democrats hold their biggest debate ever. A look at what they're proposing to win over black voters. Pastor Appreciation Month. What you can do to bless your pastor. And Drag Queen Story Hour turns into a drag queen strip show. And it's all right here on the global lane. President Trump says Turkey's invasion of Syria is not America's problem. And he says the Kurdish troops that fought with U.S. help to defeat the ISIS caliphate in Syria are, quote, no angels. Well, joining us is someone who tends to agree with President Trump on that. Retired Special Forces Lieutenant Colonel Sargis Sangari is a Middle East analyst and CEO of the Near East Center for Strategic Engagement. Sargis, thanks for joining us again. So what do you make of this Turkey mess? Has Trump made a big mistake?
Well, Turkey itself is a NATO ally, so we have agreements with Turkey that exists where we have to work as a NATO nation to be able to support them. Turkey has been itching to get into northern Iraq and Syria going back to the 80s when initially the PKK, which are the Kurds in Syria, went from being a political party that was established to becoming an armed force capability. They started conducting operations within the borders of Turkey. Almost 10,000 Turks have died during these battles. And this was just a prime time for Turkey to finally be able to get into Syria and also northern Iraq to be able to squash the PKK ability of killing Turks.
The Syrian Democratic Forces, are they democratic? My understanding is many of their forces are members of the YPG, which is closely aligned with the PKK, which is a communist group designated a terrorist group by NATO and the U.S. State Department.
No, all these forces, all these Kurdish groups have always been aligned with Russia more than they have been aligned with the U.S. We wrote an article going back to March of 2020, I believe 2016, where we said that the Kurds will take Department of Defense monies and support, but their hearts belong to their first love, which is the Russians. In 2016, at that time, Defense Secretary Ash Carter had made a proposal as far as what the U.S. foreign policy should look like when it comes to the Department of Defense budget for 2017. And his discussions, he stated that China, Russia, Korea, Iran, and the terrorism overall and globally are the 5 emerging threats that we have to deal with when it comes to Department of Defense. At that time, Mr. Murad, who was the Secretary General Counsel for the Patriotic Kurdistan Union, or PUK, met with the Russian ambassador in Kurdish regional government in KRG area and stated that the Kurds in Syria, Turkey, Iran, and Iraq are allies of Russia. So the Kurds have always had internal issues, but their hearts always belong to the Russians. The YPG flies the hammer and sickle at the funerals for their fallen soldiers. Currently, today, the money that is feeding the Free Syrian Forces that Turkey is using as their conduits to conduct these operations in Syria is being funneled money through Qatar for its interests within the region. And there are Kurds that are within the Free Syrian Army that are currently fighting against the Kurds that are part of the PKK.
So what do you make of the SDF forming an alliance now with Assad, someone who has persecuted the Kurds in the past?
Well, this alliance is what we're seeing right now on open source, but they had struck this deal even before President Trump decided to pull the forces out. One of the problems that we had was we saw that they had already started reaching out to Syria, brokering these deals, and also at the same time linking themselves to Iran. March of this past year, a video surfaced where the Kurdish forces that we were supporting within Syria had actually brought Iranian intel officers and had walked them through basically all of the basings which we had provided with U.S. taxpayer money to build for them. At the same time, they were pointing out all the disposition of all our force structures to the Iranians on the battlefield and how we were arrayed in Syria. This is one of the reasons the president, I think, has made the right decision to say If we cannot trust you as a partner and an enduring partner, then why are we here? The only good that we were providing for the Kurds in Syria was by us being there and by our soldiers dying on the battlefield, it was given an opportunity for them to try to establish their own regional government, which at the same time was suppressing all the other minorities everywhere in the region who are not socialist in ideology or mentality.
And what about Assyrian Christians? I know they don't trust Erdogan, but they say they aren't much better off with the Kurds.
No, they haven't been. The Assyrian Christians have suffered under the Kurds. The Khyber River Valley Basin was cleared out when the Kurds decided to enter and chose out of the battlefield to fight against ISIS. And the Kurds, in support of the Turkish Ottomans, were the ones that killed and captured and took into slavery majority of those Assyrian women during the first genocide. In 1933, the Kurds also aligned with the Iraqi Arab armies in order to be able to push out and kill the Syrian Christians who were in the villages and the areas surrounding Semele. Unfortunately, when you have individuals who are just jockeying for political positioning and money and dollars, this will continue to happen within the region.
And what now? What's the best course of action to end the Syrian war once and for all and keep Iran out?
Well, Iran is there. Iran's been there for 40 years. Unfortunately, our Kurdish allies, to include Barzani and the Kurdish North, in one meeting sold out all the Israeli initial intercept positions that were built as far as early warning for missile strikes from Iran against Israel to the Iranians. You cannot rely on these individuals. Iran uses that corridor, which is the Kurdish regional government area, to move supplies, equipment, weapons into areas within Syria and moves those into Lebanon and also into Syria, where it puts pressure on Israel for security requirements. What we need to do is we need to finally make a long-term decision on how to address the minority issues in Iraq and Syria. And the only way you could do it, at least in Iraq, under the current Iraqi constitutional structure, is to empower and give support for a Syrian Christian homeland, safe home, if you want to call it, or under the Iraqi constitution, it would even be a province, regional government, in order to be able to pick up all the minorities that exist from various different groups and allow them to be able to have a somewhat of a self-rule capability. Once that happens, these minorities are much better capable of working with countries like Turkey, Iran, Iraq, Syria, and to become a stabilizing factor within those countries. As long as we continue to go down this path of just literally trying to put out fires, making one group happy over the other, which are internal fights within the Kurdish factions and tribal groups against Turkey, you'll never be able to get to a final end goal. Our job is to make sure that we preserve the roots of Christianity and allow those individuals to finally have an opportunity to have a say in their own future. Okay,
Sargas Angari, thanks for those insights.
Introducing the CBN Bible from CBN.com. Now, an easier way to study the Bible and grow in your faith. Highlight your favorite verse. Read separate versions at a glance. Click and read a commentary. Or cross-reference your favorite verse using the Strong's Concordance. All the right tools to study the Bible, all in one place. The CBN Bible, available at cbn.com/Bible or the iTunes App Store.
This is CBN News Watch.
Thanks for joining us.
Watch breaking news, exclusive stories and programs, credible news reporting.
We show you what's happening in the world and how you can pray about it.
This is CBN News Watch, because truth matters. Weekdays at 5 on the CBN News Channel.
Yes, right on time.
From Superbook.
Pepper's Pizza Palace is donating pizza for everyone today.
Wait. I have big plans today.
Trust in God even when times are tough. He has a plan for your life.
Hey, we're gonna be late for the grand opening.
My parents want me to help with this outreach thing, feeding the community. What am I supposed to do here? Superbook!
Join the Superbook Club and get Superbook The Birth of Moses, plus 2 copies to share with others, all for your gift of only $25.
Pharaoh ordered all newborn
firstborn Hebrew boys thrown into the Nile River, and I have a 3-month-old brother.
The Birth of Moses. Yours for a gift of only $25.
What will you do the next time the soldiers come? I do not know, but I trust God has a plan for all of us.
Superbook Club members free streaming for seasons 1, 2, and 3 is now available.
Democratic presidential candidates are in an all-out battle to win over African-American voters. Black voter turnout declined sharply during the last presidential election, falling from a record high of 66.5% for 2012 to 59.6% in 2016. So here's what they're trying to do to motivate them to vote, and especially for them as they vie to become their party's presidential nominee. Candidate Kamala Harris, she's proposing that the government spend $100 billion to provide low-income black people with the money they need to buy homes. She says it would help 4 million people to deal with, quote, the racial wealth gap. Meanwhile, presidential candidate Cory Booker is still looking at the possibility of paying reparations to African-American descendants of slavery. He says it would address policies that are, quote, rooted in white supremacy, that continue to, quote, erode black communities and perpetuate racism. Well, joining us to provide some insights on this and the Democratic candidate's strategy is Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist Raynard Jackson. He's founder and chairman of Black Americans for a Better Future, a super PAC working to get more blacks to join the GOP. So, Mr. Jackson, thank you for joining us. Is this the way to a better future for black Americans, more free stuff?
No, it's not, Gary, and thank you for having me on your show. And I talk to blacks all across the country, and I've spent a lot of time with a lot of friends of mine in South Carolina. And to be honest with you, Gary, they are offended at the Democrats' approach to going after their vote. They're not looking for handouts and freebies. All they want is to make sure the playing field is equal and get out of their way, and they'll figure out the rest for themselves.
So, Mr. Jackson, why can't Democrats attract black voters without promising them a bunch of stuff? It seems like we're creating a nation of victims and dependents rather than self-sufficient victors.
Yeah, Gary, it's very simple. The Democratic Party has no substantive policy issues that would appeal to the black community. So what, you're going to go into the black community talking about homosexuality and transgender issues? That's a loser. You're going to talk about amnesty for illegals? Well, that's a loser. You're going to talk about increasing the minimum wage? Well, that's a loser. So what do? You try to get them emotionally riled up, those who are lower information voters. But the black community is more intelligent than the Democrats want to give them credit for. And I tell you, the policy that they're advocating are anathema to the black community. And so I want your audience to realize that there are more black folks who think like me than what you see on MSNBC and CNN. Black folks believe in substantive policies. Every time the government gets involved in the black community lives, Gary, we end up getting destroyed. Welfare, the Tuskegee experiment, et cetera. So what we need in the black community is less government intervention in our lives and just more fairness in how we approach our lives.
And we know there's a wealth disparity. Black income's about half the amount of whites. And why is that? How should that be addressed?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, Gary, because you can just look at raw data and come up with any conclusion whatsoever. For example, I often tell people the reason folks on minimum wage are having problems raising their families are because that's not the purpose of minimum wage, for you to have 1 or 2 kids, never been married, for you to raise a family on that. And so blacks in general, we have a lower number of blacks in college degrees. We have blacks who are concentrated into dense population cities that are in the inner city areas who are now being forced out to the suburbs. So when you look at home ownership in the black community, Gary, a lot of it has nothing to do with race, but more to do with choices black folks make as to where they want to live.
And President Trump often mentions that under his watch, black unemployment is down to the lowest levels ever in America, and twice last year it hit a record of, I think, about 5.9%. But I have a feeling just touting those numbers will not be enough for Republicans to attract black voters. What else must they do?
Well, you're right, Gary. The president had a great story to tell relative to the black community. Where they have fallen short is the ability to effectively communicate with the black community by way of having credible black surrogates like a Herman Cain going into the black community, talking about the success of this administration. Republicans tend to want to showcase blacks that make them feel good versus blacks who have credibility in the black community. And so if the president and his administration get credible blacks to tout his success in the black community, we can go from 8% in 2016 of the black vote to 15% or higher. And if the president gets north of 15%, Gary, mathematically, Democrats cannot win a national election.
Raynard Jackson, Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist, founder and chairman of Black Americans for a Better Future. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Gary.
When I came to Regent University, it's like the world opened up. I felt like I needed to advance my career and go back to school. Regent was a perfect fit for me. The Regent professors are world-class. You are equipped. The focus of the faculty is on each individual student, whether it's online or in person. You become a part of Regent's family. You carry with you not just the content and the knowledge, but the confidence to understand that we can be significant in the world.
Regent University. Follow your path.
Nigerian Christians in
Iran are routinely arrested.
Happily, Christians continue to suffer.
In times of trial and affliction, you need to know the truth.
One of the fastest growing Christian populations in the world.
Join Wendy Griffith and George Thomas for Christian World News.
Young people are the ones who are open to the gospel.
Powerful stories of suffering and hope that affect all Christians. Watch Christian World News, Saturday at 5 p.m. Get Protect Your Sleep and discover how to improve the quality of your life. A free DVD or booklet from the Christian Broadcasting Network.
If you're not a great sleeper, you can do things to make yourself a great sleeper. If you're already a pretty good sleeper, you can enhance your sleep and be even better.
5 leading experts help remove the obstacles between you and restorative sleep.
When you don't get a restful night's sleep, you wake up with an accumulation of stress.
Call 1-800-700-7000 or go to CBN.com to get your free DVD or booklet today.
Everything you do better with a good night's sleep.
You'll discover how food affects your sleep, how to put insomnia to rest, explore effective remedies for sleep apnea, and much more in Protect Your Sleep. Wake up to your best life and get Protect Your Sleep today. Call 1-800-700-7000 or go to CBN.com to get your free DVD or booklet.
More than half of all pastors, 57%, say they feel discouraged, stressed, and fatigued. And no wonder. Many work between 50 and 70 hours per week. Half of them earn less than $50,000 per year. So when was the last time you encouraged your pastor? October is Bless Your Pastor Month. Earlier this summer, I talked with Brian Kluth of the National Association of Evangelicals about a new program called Bless Your Pastor. He says there are many ways that people can put their faith into action to bless their pastors.
Gary, thanks for having me on. We're excited because Bless Your Pastor is an opportunity for Christians and churches across America to intentionally bless their pastor. And as you mentioned, pastors are discouraged. Many of them face difficult financial challenges. And when their congregation, people in their congregation, or the church as a whole, does things to really serve them and bless them, it makes such a difference in their life and such a difference to their family. So we're launching this movement to help that happen.
So, Brian, many people think when they put money in the offering plate that it's helping to keep the lights on, the air conditioning going in their church buildings, of course, but they also believe it kind of provides plenty for the pastor to live on, but that's not necessarily so. So what's the truth about pastors' salaries, their financial health?
Yeah, the truth is most people are not aware of what pastors are really paid. But when we really go into the numbers, 50% of pastors are paid under $50,000 a year. And again, that's working 50, 60, 70 hours a week. 60% of pastors receive no retirement, no health care, and no employee benefits from their church. In many churches, they're small. It's not, people think, oh, there's a mega church pastor, there's a celebrity pastor. Well, the reality is 80% of churches in America have under 200 people in attendance on Sundays. And the average budget in America is $125,000 for the church. So 50% of churches have under $125,000 to take care of missions, take care of the pastor, take care of the facilities. And so there's just not a lot of money to go around. And so this movement is really much bigger than a paycheck. It's really about what can an individual Christian do according to their skills, their abilities, what they possess, to really go out of their way to serve their pastor, bless their pastor, and their church staff.
I'm sure some people would say that pastoring's a calling and their families must live in poverty or at least have a lower standard of living than most members in their church.
I do think people just think, well, the pastor's fine, God takes care of them. But what most people don't realize is the way God takes care of them is through the love and the care and the concern of the people in the congregation.
I know that there are other ways to bless a pastor than just increasing his salary. I know when you were 45 years old, you took a $70,000 pay cut to become a senior pastor. So how did your church family make up that difference? What did they do?
Yeah, the reality was I did take that $70,000 pay cut because it was something I felt God wanted me to do. And I always like to say where God guides, he provides, and what he orders, he pays for. And so I took the pay cut, but when I got to my church, what I discovered is my people were wonderful to me. There were people that gave us food. There were people that watched our children. There were people that shared their vacation home with us, people that fixed our cars, people that did car projects for us. When my wife had cancer, an 8-year cancer journey, they helped take her to get her chemotherapy. They would give us gift cards to help our family so we could go out to dinner at night. And my wife, we didn't have to worry as a family to, set up the meal or prepare the meal or clean up after the meal. And so there were just all kinds of things our church did, and even helped us pay the medical bills because there were a lot of medical bills in that situation. So beyond the paycheck, there was just so many ways that they loved us so very, very well.
That's a great idea. A simple thing like a gift card to a nice restaurant so you and your wife can go out and have a nice meal, get a break. Also maybe watch the kids while you're doing it for you. That's a great idea. So what's your goal here then, Brian? I have a feeling it goes beyond just simple awareness, people saying, oh, what a shame, and then just patting their pastors on the back and telling them, hey, you delivered a good sermon today. What's the goal here?
Well, the goal is, because of Lilly Endowment, they've given us NAE a significant grant to provide free resources to literally every church in America and every Christian in America. And so what we have is we have a little flyer, 50 creative ways to show and share God's love for your pastor and church staff. And the goal is that Christians would get hold of that and that church boards would see that and they would distribute that to their congregation. We also have a little 7-minute training video so the church board knows exactly what to do. We make it very, very easy for them. And so it's the idea of distributing that, watching the video, distributing the brochure, and then also we're encouraging churches to take a annual pastor appreciation offering for the pastor and the church staff.
Okay, some great ideas to bless your pastor. Brian Kluth, National Director of Financial Health of the National Association of Evangelicals. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, thank you, and God bless you.
Christians around the world are standing with the Israelis. But why? In CBN's free magazine, Friends of Israel, you'll discover why Christians are supporting the Jewish state, how Israel is fulfilling prophecy as a light to the nations, and ways you can pray for the people of Israel. Israel needs the support of friends like you. Call now or go to cbn.com to get your free copy of Friends of Israel.
Heavenly Father, we do thank you for the work of your Spirit, Lord God, with this movement of getting the Bible,
yes,
Lord, into public schools.
Watch The Prayer Link, Tuesday nights at 6:30.
Hey, if you're tired and exhausted all day, you can't think clearly, and you really just need a cup or even a pot of coffee to get through your day, then join me, Dr. Josh Axe, for this new series where I'm going to teach you how to transform your diet and use essential oils and supplements to get a better night's sleep.
Protect your sleep and live your best life with innovative information from 5 leading sleep experts.
If you're not a great sleeper, you can do things to make yourself a great sleeper. If you're already a pretty good sleeper, you can enhance your sleep and be even better.
Discover a sleep-enhancing bedtime routine, how to put insomnia to rest, learn how to relieve pain that disturbs sleep, and much more in Protect Your Sleep.
Everything you do better with a good night's sleep.
Wake up to your best life. Call 1-800-700-7000 to get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
Don't miss out on this brand new series.
We've told you about Drag Queen Story Hour, the effort by the LGBTQ community to teach tolerance by reading in drag to children at public libraries. Well, we learned that at least one Story Hour presenter was a convicted sex offender. That was in Houston. Then earlier this year, we showed you how Drag Queen Story Hour evolved into Roll Around and Lay on the Drag Queen in Seattle. Now this, Drag Queen Strip Hour at a King County library in the state of Washington, all to a song that says, "If you feel like a girl, do your thing." Folks, how is this educational? And when Christian taxpayers say no more, my tax dollars will not be used to support this indoctrination of our children or grandchildren, we're called homophobes and bigots. We get proposals from Democratic presidential candidates to pull the tax-exempt status of churches or Christian groups and businesses who stand against this absurdity. It's all about winning votes, folks, because although they represent a small percentage of the American population, members of the LGBTQ community vote, and they do have influence. Yes, in America, we believe in protecting minority rights. The LGBTQ community must be protected from discrimination, but we don't allow the minority to have dominant influence on our society. In a democratic republic, we believe in majority rule. Jesus told us to love one another. Yes, we must love one another as He loves us. But that doesn't mean we love ungodly behavior, nor must we accept it. Remember what Christ said in the book of John, chapter 8, to the woman about to be stoned for committing adultery? He said He did not condemn her, but He told her to go and sin no more. Folks, we have a responsibility to protect our children from stripping drag queens. Jesus also warned us in Matthew 18:6, if anyone causes one of these little ones, those who believe in me, to stumble, it would be better for them to have a large millstone hung around their neck and to be drowned in the depths of the sea. So, let's tell our taxpayer-funded public libraries that we will throw them a lifeline to save them from drowning. But like the adulteress in John 8, they must go and sin no more. Well, that's it from the Global Lane. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, iTunes, SoundCloud, YouTube, and Twitter. And until next time, be blessed.